I checked the dashboard clock as I parked my car outside the upscale steakhouse in the Chicago suburbs. It was exactly 7:30 in the evening. That was the exact time printed in elegant gold foil on the expensive engagement dinner invitation my sister Kinsley had handed me a month ago. I remember looking at that invitation and thinking about how much it must have cost, but I pushed the thought away. I took a deep breath, smoothing down the fabric of my dress, feeling the exhaustion deep in my bones. After a grueling 60-hour work week managing logistics operations at a mid-sized freight company, all I wanted was to celebrate my sister, eat a decent meal, and maybe share a warm toast with our parents. The evening air was crisp and cool, carrying the heavy, mouth-watering scent of grilled ribeye, roasted garlic, and expensive red wine drifting from the restaurant's kitchen. I expected to walk into a private dining room filled with vibrant laughter, the cheerful clinking of wine glasses, and the warm buzz of a family celebrating a major milestone. Instead, the moment I pushed open the heavy oak door to our reserved private room, something felt deeply and disturbingly wrong. The room was not buzzing with celebration. It was dead silent. I stood in the doorway, my hand still resting on the cool brass handle, trying to process the surreal scene in front of me. The long, polished mahogany table was littered with the grotesque aftermath of a massive feast. Empty oyster shells sat on beds of melted, watery ice. Large, grease-stained plates held nothing but the bare bones of expensive tomahawk steaks and the remnants of rich lobster tails. Multiple wine glasses were stained with dark red dregs, and crumpled linen napkins were tossed carelessly across the table like discarded flags. They had already eaten. The lavish meal was entirely over. Kinsley looked up from her phone. She was wearing a stunning designer silk dress that I recognized instantly because the charge had hit my secondary credit card 2 weeks ago. She did not look apologetic. She did not look surprised. She just smirked, running a hand through her perfectly styled blonde hair, her diamond engagement ring catching the dim restaurant lighting. Holden, her new fiancé, sat next to her. He was leaning back in his chair, picking his teeth with a toothpick and letting out a low, dismissive chuckle as he looked at me. My father, Orson, suddenly found the intricate ceiling tiles fascinating, refusing to meet my gaze. My mother, Corinne, took a slow, deliberate sip of her sparkling water, actively avoiding my eyes while adjusting the expensive pearl necklace I had bought her for Mother's Day. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, wrapping around my throat. I tightened my grip on the small, heavy velvet box I had brought as an engagement gift for the groom. I thought dinner started at 7:30, I said, keeping my voice dangerously level, fighting the tremor of shock that was trying to creep into my words. Kinsley rolled her eyes, clearly annoyed that my arrival was ruining her carefully curated aesthetic. Oh, we moved it to 6. I guess we forgot to text you. Anyway, you are always so busy with your little shipping trucks and warehouses, we figured you would be late no matter what. My heart hammered against my ribs, a slow, painful rhythm. It was not a mistake. My mother had called me at noon to confirm I was coming, and she had clearly stated 7:30. They had orchestrated this entire scenario. They had ordered the most expensive items on the menu, drank the finest vintage wine, and enjoyed a lavish, uninterrupted engagement party without the burden of my actual presence. They did not want me there to celebrate. Then, Kinsley reached into her designer clutch. She pulled out a long, crisp white receipt. With a careless flick of her wrist, she slid it across the polished wood of the table. It glided smoothly until it stopped right in front of my empty, unused ceramic plate. I looked down. The total at the bottom was printed in bold black ink. $4,850.30. Pay up, sister, Kinsley said, her tone dripping with mock sweetness and undeniable malice. And do not ruin my special night by making a scene. You know Dad is on a fixed income, and Holden and I are saving for the wedding. Be a good big sister for once. A cold, heavy realization settled into the pit of my stomach, spreading like ice through my veins. I looked around the room, studying the faces of the people who were supposed to be my family. Holden was smirking, clearly enjoying the show. My parents looked expectant, waiting for me to pull out my wallet like I always did. No one felt an ounce of shame. No one thought this behavior was cruel. For years, I had been the invisible daughter. The one whose hard-earned promotions were ignored, whose long working hours were mocked, whose accomplishments were brushed aside as boring. Yet, whenever there was a crisis, a past-due bill, a sudden emergency, or a luxury they could not afford, I was the first one they called. I was not a family member to them. I was a walking ATM. They did not want me at this dinner to share their joy. They just wanted my credit card to arrive in time for the check. Kinsley tapped her freshly manicured nails on the table, an irritating, rhythmic sound. Come on, Sutton. Hand over the card. The waiter is waiting, and we want to go out for drinks. I did not reach for my purse. I did not cry. I did not scream or throw a fit. Instead, I reached into the velvet gift box I had brought for Holden. Inside was a heavy, custom-engraved silver lighter I had purchased from a luxury boutique. I pulled it out. The room went unnervingly still. I picked up the $4,000 receipt, held it steady over my empty ceramic dinner plate, and flicked the lighter. The flame caught the edge of the thick thermal paper instantly. Gasps erupted around the table. Kinsley shrieked, jumping back in her chair as if she had been physically burned. What are you doing? Are you crazy? She screamed, her perfectly curated facade shattering into pure panic. I watched in silence as the fire ate through the long list of expensive wines, dry-aged steaks, and imported oysters. The bright orange flame illuminated the shock on my parents' faces. I dropped the burning paper onto the plate, letting it turn into a pile of fragile, black ashes. I placed the silver lighter neatly next to the ashes, turned my back on my stunned family, and walked out the door. The sound of Kinsley screaming my name echoed down the hallway, but I did not stop. When the restaurant door closed behind me, the cool night air hit my face, bringing a sudden, sharp clarity. I thought that was the peak of their entitlement. I thought I had just ended the nightmare. But I was entirely wrong. The next morning, a single phone call would prove just how rotten my family truly was. Have you ever wondered how you become the bank for your own family? Have you ever noticed the exact moment you stop being a daughter or a sister and become nothing more than a financial safety net? If you have ever been the financial punching bag for the people who are supposed to love you, drop a comment below. Let me know I am not the only one. Because looking back, the signs were always there, glowing in neon colors. I just chose to ignore them for the sake of peace. The drive home from the steakhouse was a blur of passing streetlights and pure adrenaline. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, the silence of my car a sharp contrast to Kinsley's shrill screams echoing in my memory. I pulled into the driveway of my home. It was a spacious, well-maintained duplex in a quiet neighborhood. I had purchased this property 5 years ago through sheer grit, working ridiculous shifts, skipping vacations, and saving every extra penny I earned in the logistics industry. I lived on the ground floor, a modest space I had decorated myself. My parents and Kinsley lived in the sprawling, sunlit upper unit. They did not pay rent. They did not pay utilities. They did not even pay for their own internet. When I bought the place, Orson had spun a masterful sob story about his failing health, claiming his heart could no longer handle the stress of his car sales job and that he needed to retire early. Corinne, who barely worked 2 days a week as a substitute teacher, cried real tears about wanting to keep the family together under one roof. She said it would be a blessing for us to be close. I let them move in. I thought I was being a good daughter. I thought I was securing my family's future. I unlocked my front door, the silence of my own apartment feeling heavier and colder than usual. I did not bother turning on the main living room lights. I walked straight to my home office, turned on my laptop, and opened a password-protected spreadsheet simply titled Family. For years, my meticulous habits from managing complex freight budgets had bled into my personal life. I documented everything out of habit. Every loan they asked for, every emergency they claimed they had, every shared expense I covered. I poured myself a glass of cold water, sat in my ergonomic desk chair, and stared at the glowing screen. The numbers staring back at me were a museum of my own foolishness. They told a story of relentless exploitation. Line 1. $12,000. That was the seed money I gave Kinsley 3 years ago to start her online clothing boutique. She had convinced my mother that she was born to be an entrepreneur, that a standard 9-to-5 job would crush her creative spirit. I funded the inventory, the website design, and the marketing. 3 months later, Kinsley got bored, abandoned the website, and kept the unsold designer clothes to wear herself. The money vanished into thin air, and whenever I brought it up, I was accused of being unsupportive. Line 2. $8,500. That was for a critical roof repair Orson claimed they needed at their old house right before they moved into my duplex. He said the roof was caving in and dangerous. I found out months later from a former neighbor that the roof was perfectly fine. My father had used the cash to buy a brand new set of custom golf clubs and a country club membership. When I confronted him, my mother had wept, saying Orson needed a hobby for his mental health and that I was being cruel for counting pennies when he was so fragile. I kept scrolling down the endless rows of data. The utility bills for the upper unit, always inexplicably high because Kinsley left the air conditioning running with the windows open. The property taxes. Curran's expensive wellness retreats she claimed were for her arthritis. Kinsley's car payments when she suddenly quit her part-time job because the manager looked at her wrong. Month after month, year after year, I paid it all. I dragged my mouse to the bottom of the column and highlighted the total sum. $80,500. Over the last 4 years, I had handed my family $80,500. I leaned back in my chair, the stark white glow of the monitor illuminating the dark room. A bitter, hollow laugh escaped my lips. The contrast between our lives was physically sickening. I woke up at 4:30 every single morning. I spent my days routing heavy trucks, yelling at unreliable vendors, and managing complex supply chains until my head pounded and my vision blurred. I drove a reliable, 5-year-old sedan. Meanwhile, Kinsley slept until 11 in the morning. She woke up to film herself making an iced matcha latte with expensive organic groceries I bought, and posted it on Instagram to her few thousand followers, pretending she lived a life of self-made luxury. My parents enabled her every delusion, treating her like royalty. To them, Kinsley was a fragile flower who needed constant protecting and funding, while I was the emotionless workhorse who could endure anything and pay for everything. My phone buzzed loudly on the wooden desk, shattering the silence. It was a text from Corinne. "You humiliated us tonight. Kinsley is inconsolable and Holden's parents are going to hear about this. You need to call the restaurant, apologize to the manager, and pay them over the phone right now. Family takes care of family, Sutton. Fix this." I read the text 3 times. Family takes care of family. I looked back at the $80,500 glaring at me from the screen. I took a slow sip of my water. It tasted like ash. For the first time in my 32 years of life, the heavy, suffocating guilt that usually followed my mother's manipulative texts was entirely gone. It was replaced by a cold, calculating, and undeniable clarity. I had spent my entire adult life trying to buy their love, thinking that if I just helped them enough, if I just proved my worth, they would finally see me. They would finally respect me as a person, not just a wallet. But you cannot buy respect from people who only see you as a resource to be mined. I closed the spreadsheet. I made my decision right then and there. It was time to shut off the tap forever. The execution of my decision was swift, methodical, and surprisingly unemotional. I opened a new secure browser tab and logged directly into my main banking portal. My fingers flew across the keyboard with the cold precision of a surgeon cutting out a malignant tumor. First, I navigated to the credit card management page. Kinsley had a secondary card tied to my primary account, a card I had originally authorized just for basic groceries and gas emergencies. Over time, it had morphed into a personal fund for designer shoes and expensive brunch dates. I hovered my mouse over the red deactivate button. A pop-up warning asked if I was sure I wanted to terminate the card privileges. I clicked yes without a second thought. The card was officially dead. Next, I navigated to my checking account settings. For the past 4 years, recurring automatic transfer of $800 had gone directly into Orson and Corinne's joint account on the first of every single month to cover their personal living expenses. I found the scheduled transfer, clicked delete, and confirmed the action. Gone. Lastly, I picked up my phone, went into my contact settings, and blocked Orson, Corinne, and Kinsley. I needed absolute silence to think, to breathe, and to prepare for the massive storm that I knew was inevitably coming my way. The storm did not wait long to make landfall. By noon the very next day, my phone began lighting up with text messages and missed calls from numbers I had not seen or heard from in months. The flying monkeys were officially being deployed. My mother, realizing she was blocked and unable to reach me directly, had activated her network of enablers and gossips. First came a long, scolding text message from Uncle Yates, a man who had not remembered my birthday in over a decade, but always had an opinion on how I should live my life. Sutton, what on earth is wrong with you? Your mother just called me in absolute tears. Ruining your sister's engagement dinner over a simple restaurant bill is sick and uncalled for. You have always been so selfish with your money. You are just jealous because Kinsley found a good, wealthy man and you are still sitting alone in that house. Call your mother and fix this mess immediately. 10 minutes later, Cousin Blythe chimed in on Facebook Messenger, her tone dripping with condescension. Honestly, Sutton, you making a massive public scene over a dinner bill is so incredibly trashy. Kinsley is stressed enough about wedding planning without you throwing a tantrum. Grow up and be a supportive sister for once in your life. I did not reply to any of them. I did not try to defend myself or explain my side of the story. I simply took screenshots of every single message, saved them to a dedicated digital folder, and muted the conversations. It was morbidly fascinating how quickly the extended family could judge a situation they knew nothing about, acting purely based on my mother's twisted, victimized narrative. In their eyes, I was the bitter, lonely, money-hoarding spinster trying to ruin the golden child's perfect happiness. Then, my phone rang again. The caller ID showed Aunt Maeve. She was Corinne's older sister, a sharp, no-nonsense real estate agent who had always seen through my family's elaborate facade of perfection. She was the only person in the family who had ever praised my work ethic. I hesitated for a moment, watching her name flash on the screen, then answered. Sutton, honey, are you all right? Maeve's voice was sharp but carried a genuine warmth that made my chest tighten. I let out a long, shaky breath I did not know I was holding. I am fine, Aunt Maeve. I am surviving. I just got an earful from your mother, she said, sighing loudly into the receiver. She claims you had a psychotic break at a fancy steakhouse, burned a napkin in a fit of rage, and left them stranded with a massive bill they could not pay. Now, knowing Corinne for 60 years, that is about 10% truth and 90% pure fiction. What actually happened? I told her everything. I told her about the changed reservation time they hid from me, the empty plates, the $4,850 receipt Kinsley tossed at me, and her demanding I pay for a party I was excluded from. Maeve listened quietly, never interrupting. When I finally finished the story, she let out a low, impressed whistle. Good for you, Sutton. It is about damn time. You have been carrying those three on your back for way too long. If you need a safe place to stay while things cool down, my guest room is always open for you. Thank you, Maeve. Your support means everything. But I am not running away. It is my house, and I am staying right here. Her validation felt like a lifeline thrown into turbulent water. I was not crazy. I was not overreacting. I thanked her and hung up, feeling a renewed, fierce sense of strength. I thought my silence and my financial cutoff would force them to reflect on their actions. I thought ignoring them would make them finally realize the gravy train had derailed permanently. But I deeply underestimated their entitlement and their rage. That evening, as I was cooking a quiet dinner for myself, the ceiling above me creaked heavily. Heavy, angry footsteps thundered down the internal wooden staircase that connected the upper unit directly to my ground floor hallway. They were coming for me. The pounding on my front door was violent enough to rattle the picture frames hanging on the hallway wall. The heavy thuds echoed through my quiet apartment like a warning drum. Sutton, open this door right now. Orson's voice boomed through the thick oak wood, vibrating with unrestrained anger. Do not hide from us in there. I turned off the burner on the stove, calmly wiped my hands on a dish towel, and walked slowly to the entryway. My heart rate elevated slightly, but my mind was remarkably clear. I did not unlock the deadbolt. I simply opened the door a few inches, keeping the heavy steel security chain firmly engaged. Through the narrow gap, I saw them. Orson's face was flushed a dark, angry purple. Corinne was standing slightly behind him, clutching her pearls, looking fragile, devastated, and deeply wronged. Kinsley was standing to the side, holding her smartphone like a weapon, her face twisted in a vicious, ugly scowl that ruined her carefully applied makeup. "My card was declined at the nail salon today," Kinsley shrieked, shoving her phone screen toward the crack in the door so I could see the red decline notification. The nail tech laughed at me in front of everyone. "You canceled my card. You humiliated me again." "Yes, I did," I said calmly, my voice steady and devoid of any emotion. Corinne gasped loudly, stepping forward and placing a hand against the doorframe. "Sutton, how could you be so incredibly vindictive? Your sister was deeply humiliated today. And your father went to get groceries this morning, and his debit card declined at the register too. You stopped our monthly allowance without even a phone call. We are your family. You cannot just cut us off without warning like we mean nothing to you." I looked my mother dead in the eye, feeling nothing but a profound emptiness where my daughterly affection used to be. "I am not a bank, Mom. The free ride is over." "You are a cold-blooded monster," Kinsley yelled, stomping her foot on the hardwood floor like a petulant toddler. "You are just trying to punish me because you have a miserable, boring life and you hate seeing me happy and successful." I unhooked the security chain and opened the door fully. They instinctively took a collective step back, surprised by my sudden movement. I was not yelling. My posture was relaxed, and my voice remained dangerously quiet. I reached onto the console table by the door and picked up a thick manila folder I had meticulously prepared earlier that afternoon. I held it out toward Orson. He stared at it suspiciously for a few seconds before snatching it aggressively from my hand. "What is this garbage?" "That is a formal, itemized ledger of the $80,500 I have spent keeping you three afloat over the last 4 years," I said, watching his eyes widen as he processed the number. "And underneath that ledger is a new lease agreement." Orson opened the folder, his eyes rapidly scanning the dense spreadsheets and legal documents. His flushed face went pale very quickly. Corinne tried to look over his shoulder, her brow furrowing in confusion. "This is not your house anymore," I continued, my voice steady and authoritative. "This is my property. Living upstairs rent-free was a privilege that I extended out of kindness. A privilege you have thoroughly abused. Starting the 1st of next month, you will contribute exactly 60% of all household utilities, property taxes, and maintenance for this duplex. The exact dollar amount you owe monthly is listed clearly on page 3 of that contract." Corinne put a trembling hand over her mouth, looking at me as if I had grown a second head. "You want us to pay you? We are your parents, Sutton. We gave you life. You owe us for raising you and putting a roof over your head when you were a child." "I did not ask to be born," I replied instantly, cutting off her guilt trip before it could begin. "And raising a child is a basic legal and moral obligation, not a financial investment you get to cash out when you refuse to work and want to live in luxury." Kinsley pushed past our father, her face red with fury. "We are not paying you a single dime, you psycho. Holden makes good money. He said you are just a bitter, jealous spinster, and we do not have to listen to your insane demands." I nodded slowly, letting a faint, cold smile touch my lips. "That is perfectly fine, Kinsley. You do not have to sign it. But if that signed agreement and the first month's payment are not sitting in my mailbox by 5 p.m. on the 1st of the month, a formal 90-day eviction notice will be filed with the county court. I will have the sheriff come and physically remove you and your belongings from the premises." The hallway fell dead silent. The heavy threat of a legal, public eviction hung in the air like a guillotine. They looked at my face and realized, perhaps for the first time in their lives, that I was not bluffing. I was not going to back down. The balance of power in this family, which they had hoarded and abused for 32 years, had just shifted entirely into my hands. "You would throw your own family out onto the street?" Orson whispered, his anger suddenly replaced by genuine shock and a hint of fear. I would ask 3 capable, healthy adults to support themselves like the rest of the world does. I corrected him smoothly. Have a good night. I firmly closed the heavy door in their faces, locked the deadbolt, and slid the security chain back into place. I stood in my hallway and listened to them stand there in stunned silence for a full minute before they slowly, quietly trudged back up the stairs. The victory tasted sweet, but I knew it was short-lived. They were not going to surrender that easily. Toxic people never go down without a dirty fight. When toxic people can no longer control you, they will immediately pivot to trying to control how others see you. Kinsley, suddenly stripped of her unlimited funding and facing the terrifying prospect of actually having to pay her own bills, turned to the only weapon she had left in her arsenal, her social media following. 2 days after the staircase confrontation, Aunt Maeve sent me a screen recording with the caption, "Watch your back, kid." It was Kinsley's Instagram story. The video started with Kinsley sitting on her expensive bed upstairs, looking intentionally disheveled. She wore no makeup, her hair was messy, and tears were streaming down her face. It was an Oscar-worthy performance. I hate doing this publicly, Kinsley sniffled directly into the camera lens, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. But a lot of you have been messaging me, asking why my wedding planning has suddenly stalled and why I have been so quiet. The truth is, my family is going through a nightmare right now. My older sister is going through a severe mental health crisis. She has become extremely paranoid about money, having terrifying delusions, and she is actively trying to kick my elderly, sick parents and me out of our long-time family home. We are terrified of what she might do next. Please pray for us, and if anyone knows a good lawyer who works pro bono for victims of abuse, please reach out to my DMs. I stared at the screen, a cold, calculated fury washing over me. She was not just playing the victim to get sympathy, she was intentionally weaponizing my boundaries. She was painting me as a mentally unstable abuser to preemptively justify whatever nasty retaliation they were planning. She was building a public narrative. That afternoon, I walked out of my front door to head to the grocery store. As I approached the end of my driveway, a sleek, loud sports car abruptly pulled up, blocking my sedan in. Holden stepped out of the driver's side. He wore a tight designer polo shirt, expensive sunglasses, and a deeply smug expression. He walked aggressively up my driveway, intentionally invading my personal space. "Listen to me very carefully, Sutton," he sneered, pointing a rigid finger at my chest. "I do not know what kind of sick power trip you are on, but you are making my fiancé cry every single day. Kinsley told me you are trying to extort money from them through some fake lease agreement." I swatted his pointing hand away without hesitation. "Extort? I own this entire house, Holden. My name is the only one on the deed. They live here for free on my dime." He laughed, a harsh, grating sound that showed his utter ignorance. "Nice try. Kinsley already told me the truth. Her dad bought this place with his retirement money and put it in your name temporarily for tax reasons. You are stealing from your own parents. If you do not back off, rip up that fake lease, and apologize to Kinsley tonight, I am going to make your life very difficult. I know people in this town. You do not want to mess with me." I looked at him, studying his arrogant posture, realizing just how deeply Kinsley had lied to this man to secure her engagement. He actually thought she was a wealthy, pampered heiress being bullied by a crazy, thieving sister. "Holden," I said softly, my voice laced with pity. "You are marrying a mirage. Now move your car before I call a tow truck and have it impounded." He glared at me from behind his sunglasses, muttered a vicious curse word under his breath, and got back into his car, speeding off with a screech of tires. The encounter left my hands trembling with adrenaline. This was no longer just petty family drama over a dinner bill. They were actively building a false narrative to ruin my reputation, and Holden was reckless and arrogant enough to escalate things physically or legally. Instead of going to the grocery store, I got in my car and drove straight to a highly rated local law firm downtown. I paid for a premium hour consultation with a senior real estate attorney. I handed over the original deed to the house, the financial records proving I paid every mortgage installment, and the screenshots and screen recordings of Kinsley's defamatory posts. The lawyer reviewed the documents, assured me my eviction threat was entirely legally sound, and advised me to install security cameras around the perimeter of the property immediately. I spent the rest of the day gathering and printing every bank statement, every receipt, building an impenetrable paper fortress of evidence. I was preparing for a messy, drawn-out civil dispute. I had no idea that the real danger was not civil at all. It was criminal. It was Tuesday morning. I was sitting at my office desk, deep in the middle of a complex shipping manifesto for a major client, when my desk phone rang sharply. The caller ID read Community Trust Bank. This was the local branch where I held my primary checking account, my emergency savings, and a substantial 401k retirement rollover account I had been building since my first job out of college. Sutton speaking, how can I help you? I answered, my eyes still scanning the spreadsheet on my monitor. Good morning, Miss Sutton. This is Declan, the branch manager at Community Trust. I apologize for interrupting your workday, but we have a highly time-sensitive and critical security matter regarding your accounts that requires your immediate attention. I stopped typing. The tone of his voice was gravely serious. My stomach tightened into a hard knot. What kind of security matter, Mr. Declan? Has my debit card been compromised? Yesterday afternoon, right before closing, your father, Orson, came into our branch, Mr. Declan explained, his voice strictly professional and measured. He presented a power of attorney document to one of our tellers. He claimed that you had suffered a severe emotional and mental breakdown over the weekend and were no longer capable of managing your own finances safely. The legal document he presented granted him and your sister, Kinsley, full administrative control over your checking, savings, and retirement accounts. The busy office around me seemed to fade into a dull, distant hum. I could hear the rapid thumping of my own heartbeat in my ears. A power of attorney? I repeated, my voice hollow, struggling to comprehend the sheer scale of the betrayal. Yes, Mr. Declan said softly. Once he presented the document, he requested an immediate wire transfer of $40,000 from your retirement account to an external account registered under Kinsley's name. He cited emergency medical expenses and specialized care facility costs for your supposed condition. I closed my eyes. They were not just trying to stay in the house rent-free. They were not just trying to get their monthly allowance back. They were trying to steal my retirement. They were trying to drain every single penny I had worked for, sweating in warehouses and offices for years, all under the guise of the fake mental health crisis Kinsley had intentionally fabricated on Instagram to build an alibi. Did the wire transfer go through? I asked, my voice suddenly razor-sharp, slicing through the lingering shock. No, Mr. Declan replied immediately, and I let out a massive, shuddering breath of relief. Our fraud department flagged the request instantly. The signature on the power of attorney document did not match the signature card we have on file for you. It was a poor imitation. When we questioned Orson about the discrepancy and asked for secondary verification, he became highly defensive, aggressive, and hurriedly left the branch, leaving the fraudulent document behind on the counter. I am calling to officially verify if you authorized any of this. I stared out the window of my office. For a brief, fleeting second, a wave of profound sorrow washed over me. I thought of the times my father used to carry me on his shoulders when I was a little girl, laughing in the park. I thought of my mother baking cookies on Sunday afternoons. Then, that image shattered, replaced by the memory of Kinsley demanding $4,850 for a steak dinner, while simultaneously, my father was plotting to walk into a bank and steal my entire future. The very last shred of familial obligation, the last drop of unconditional love inside me, withered and died in that exact moment. No, Mr. Declan. The document is an absolute forgery. I am perfectly healthy, and I never signed anything giving them access to my money. I understand completely, he said gravely. We have permanently frozen all your accounts to prevent any external access, and we are placing a verbal password on your profile. I must ask you, Miss Sutton. Falsifying a legal financial document and attempting wire fraud is a severe federal offense. Would you like us to forward this evidence and the security footage to the police department to press charges? I looked down at my desk. Outside, through the window, I could see the city moving on, unaware of the devastating betrayal I was sitting in. I could say yes. I could send my father to jail. I could have the police knock on their door right now with handcuffs. But that would be too quiet. It would allow Kinsley to play the victim once again, to cry to her followers and Holden that I had framed her elderly father out of spite. No, I needed an audience. I needed the people they cared about most, the people they were trying to impress, to see exactly who they were and what they had done. No, I told the bank manager, my voice calm and resolute. Please do not call the police yet. Keep the forged document safe in your vault. I will come by tomorrow morning to collect a certified copy of it, along with the wire transfer request form. I am going to handle this situation personally. I hung up the phone. A strange, serene energy washed over me. I was done reacting. I was done being on the defensive. My family wanted a show. Kinsley wanted a lavish family gathering to celebrate her lies. I was going to give her exactly what she wanted. And it was going to be the last family gathering she ever had. If you want to see exactly how Sutton burns her family's lies to the ground in front of everyone they know, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss part 2 of this crazy story. Wednesday morning arrived with a heavy, overcast sky, perfectly matching the cold, unyielding determination that had settled deep within my chest. I did not bother going into the office that day. Instead, I called my regional director and informed him I was taking a personal day to handle a severe family emergency. I drove to Community Trust Bank right when they opened their heavy glass doors at 9 in the morning. The air inside the bank was crisp and smelled faintly of floor wax and old paper. Mr. Declan, the branch manager, was already expecting me. True to his word, he had everything waiting in a secure, sealed manila folder on his polished mahogany desk. He handed the folder across the desk with a look of profound, genuine sympathy. I opened it slowly. Inside were the certified copies of the power of attorney document, complete with my father's clumsy, shaking attempt at forging my signature. Next to it was the official wire transfer request form demanding $40,000 for a completely fabricated medical emergency. The bank's fraud department had stamped a massive, undeniable warning across the front of both pages. The word fraud screamed from the white paper in thick, intimidating red ink. Looking at those documents in person, holding the physical proof of my family's ultimate betrayal in my hands, extinguished whatever tiny, lingering spark of daughterly guilt I had left. They had tried to rob my future to pay for a party. I thanked Mr. Declan for his swift action, took the folder, and drove straight back to my duplex. I spent the entire afternoon at my kitchen table, transforming my quiet dining area into a tactical war room. I brought out my heavy-duty printer, my highlighters, and the thick stacks of financial evidence I had painstakingly compiled over the weekend. My plan required absolute precision. I needed them to feel entirely secure, confident that they had won our little Cold War. Toxic people thrive on the arrogant belief that they have finally worn you down and forced you to submit to their will. I pulled out my phone, took a deep breath, and unblocked the family group chat that included Orson, Corinne, and Kinsley. I typed out a message specifically designed to stroke their massive, fragile egos and lure them into a false sense of absolute victory. I have done a lot of thinking over the past few days, I wrote, making sure my tone sounded thoroughly defeated, submissive, and apologetic. I realize I completely overreacted at the restaurant, and the stress of my job made me take things out on you. Family should always stick together, no matter what. I want to make things right and give Kinsley the celebration she truly deserves. Please invite Holden and his parents to my house this Saturday evening for a formal dinner. I am having it professionally catered. I have a major surprise for the wedding fund that I want to present to everyone in person to show my support. I hit send, set the phone on the table, and waited. It did not take long at all. The typing bubble appeared on the screen almost instantly. Corinne replied first, her text arriving less than a minute later. Oh, Sutton. I knew you would eventually come to your senses. We forgive you, sweetie. We know you have been under a lot of pressure at work. We will see you Saturday evening. Wear something nice." Kinsley chimed in 5 minutes later, her text dripping with the smug, entitled victory I knew she was feeling. It takes a big person to admit when they are entirely wrong. Holden's parents love formal dinner parties, so do not embarrass us. Make sure you order the catering from that expensive Italian place downtown, not the cheap spot you usually like. And make sure there is plenty of good wine. I set my phone face down on the wooden table and let out a dry, humorless laugh that echoed in the empty kitchen. They really bought it. They actually thought I was going to hand them a massive cashier's check to fund their delusions. They thought the threat of their silent treatment, combined with Holden's pathetic little driveway intimidation tactic, had successfully broken my spirit. They had absolutely no idea they were walking blindly into an ambush from which their reputations would never recover. I left the house and drove to a high-end stationery store downtown. I browsed the aisles until I found exactly what I was looking for: high-quality, heavy cardstock envelopes in a deep, rich red color. They looked exactly like the traditional luxury envelopes used for giving generous cash gifts at high society weddings. I bought a pack of them, returned home, and sat back down at my war room table to begin assembling the packages. Into the first red envelope, designated specifically for Holden, I carefully placed the certified copy of the bank fraud document. Behind that damning piece of paper, I placed a detailed, multi-page printout of Kinsley's actual credit score, which I had legally obtained as the primary account holder of her secondary card. I also included a long list of the massive debts she had racked up buying fake designer bags to impress him, debts I had routinely paid off to keep the aggressive collection agencies from harassing us. Into the second envelope, meant for Holden's wealthy, image-obsessed parents, Richard and Eleanor, I placed the meticulously itemized ledger. This document detailed the $80,500 I had spent keeping my family afloat over the last 4 years, proving undeniably that they were not the affluent, self-sufficient family Kinsley pretended they were. They were financial parasites. The third envelope was reserved for Orson and Corinne. It contained nothing but the official, legally binding 72-hour eviction notice my real estate lawyer had drafted that morning. I was substituting it for the original 90-day warning. If they were willing to commit federal wire fraud against me, I was no longer legally or morally willing to give them 3 months to find a new place to live. I sealed each envelope carefully, tracing the sharp edges with my thumb to ensure they were securely closed. The trap was perfectly set. The bait had been taken. All I needed now was for the audience to take their seats. Saturday evening arrived with a crisp chill in the air. The atmosphere inside my ground-floor apartment smelled heavily of expensive catered garlic bread, rich roasted chicken with rosemary, and the thick, suffocating tension radiating from my own bones. I had dressed simply but sharply, wearing a dark navy blouse and tailored slacks. I looked more like a corporate executive preparing for a hostile boardroom takeover than a loving older sister hosting a warm family dinner party. I checked my reflection in the hallway mirror, ensuring my expression gave away absolutely nothing. At exactly 7 o'clock, the doorbell chimed. The players had arrived for the final act. I opened the heavy front door to a sea of fake, radiant smiles and the aggressive scent of expensive floral perfume. Kinsley pushed past me first, not even bothering to say hello. She was wearing yet another brand-new cocktail dress, holding Holden's arm tightly, projecting the carefully curated image of a flawless, wealthy bride-to-be. Holden wore a sharp, tailored suit. He shot me a condescending, victorious smirk as he walked in, clearly believing his little threat in my driveway had successfully bullied me into opening my checkbook. Holden's parents, Richard and Eleanor, walked in next. They were wealthy, country club types who looked around my modest, comfortable living room with polite but thinly veiled judgment. My parents followed close behind them. Corinne practically floated into the room, acting like the gracious, benevolent matriarch of a grand estate, while Orson puffed out his chest, looking incredibly proud and triumphant. To my immense relief, Aunt Maeve arrived a few minutes later, bringing Uncle Yates along with her. Yates immediately started eyeing the liquor cabinet in the corner, while Maeve walked past everyone and gave my arm a reassuring, silent, and incredibly firm squeeze. She was the only person in the entire room who knew the truth about what was about to happen, and her strong presence was the anchor keeping me grounded in reality. I ushered everyone into the formal dining room. The large table was beautifully set with my best plates and silverware. The expensive catered food was steaming in elegant silver chafing dishes. Everyone took their seats, the room filling with the sounds of pouring wine and polite, meaningless chatter. The atmosphere was sickeningly sweet. Kinsley spent the first 20 minutes of the dinner loudly boasting about the lavish destination wedding she was planning in Tuscany. She casually dropped names of highly sought-after floral designers and luxury resorts that cost thousands of dollars a night. Corinne kept nodding along enthusiastically, shooting me pointed, expectant looks across the table, silently demanding that I absorb the cost of these grand, impossible plans without complaint. Holden's mother, Eleanor, smiled thinly, taking a delicate bite of her salad. "It all sounds terribly expensive and grand, Kinsley dear. We are so incredibly glad your family is doing so well and can contribute so generously to the event. Holden is a very lucky young man." Corinne waved her hand dismissively, laughing a high-pitched, fake laugh. "Oh, money is just a tool to make beautiful memories, Eleanor. And Sutton has always been so incredibly dedicated to supporting her little sister's dreams. Right, Sutton?" I took a slow, deliberate sip of my ice water, my face a carefully constructed mask of stone. "Yes, Mom. I have been very dedicated." Uncle Yates, who was already heavily buzzed from downing 3 rapid glasses of red wine, decided this was his grand moment to impart some elder wisdom upon me. He leaned heavily across the table, pointing a greasy, chicken-coated fork directly in my direction. "You know, Sutton, it takes a lot of maturity to admit when you are acting crazy and out of line. Making a massive scene over a little restaurant bill was embarrassing for all of us to hear about. But family is family at the end of the day. You do your duty, you write the check to fix your mistakes, and you keep everyone happy. That is just how the real world works." Before I could say a single word in response, Aunt Maeve slammed the base of her wine glass down on the wooden table. The sharp, violent crack of thick glass against solid wood echoed loudly through the room, silencing Yates instantly and causing Eleanor to jump in her seat. "Shut your mouth, Yates," Maeve snapped, her voice cutting through the stuffy room like a cracking whip. "You do not know a single fraction of what actually goes on in this house. Let the girl speak." The entire dining table fell dead silent. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Everyone stared at Maeve in absolute shock, then slowly, cautiously turned their eyes toward me. This was it. The sugar-coated illusion they had all been participating in had finally reached its expiration date. I stood up slowly from my chair. I did not smile. I did not look apologetic or defeated. I reached over to the side buffet table and picked up a polished silver serving tray. Resting exactly in the center of the gleaming metal were the 3 thick, heavy, red cardstock envelopes. "I promised everyone a major surprise for the wedding fund tonight," I said, my voice carrying clearly and evenly across the quiet dining room. "And I always keep my promises." I walked slowly around the perimeter of the large table. I handed the first heavy envelope directly to Holden. He took it with a greedy, eager grin, practically snatching it from the tray. I handed the second envelope to his parents, Richard and Eleanor, placing it gently next to their wine glasses. Finally, I tossed the third and final envelope onto the table right in front of Orson and Corinne. It landed with a dull, heavy thud against the wood. "Go ahead," I instructed them, taking a step back and crossing my arms over my chest. "Open them." Holden tore into his red envelope with the frantic enthusiasm of a child on Christmas morning, clearly expecting to find a massive cashier's check bearing several zeros. Richard and Eleanor opened theirs with far more polite restraint, Eleanor carefully slicing the thick paper open with her silver butter knife. Orson and Corinne, however, just stared at their envelope. A sudden, paranoid hesitation flashed in my father's eyes. He knew I was not one for dramatic, empty gestures, and the weight of his recent crimes was clearly hanging heavy on his conscience. The silence in the dining room stretched incredibly tight, feeling like a heavy rubber band about to snap violently. Holden reached into his envelope and pulled out the thick stack of folded papers. The smug, arrogant smile on his face vanished the absolute instant his eyes registered the word fraud stamped in massive, bleeding red ink across the top document. He blinked rapidly, his brow furrowing in deep, genuine confusion. "What the hell is this?" he muttered under his breath, flipping quickly to the second page. As he read further down the documents, his face began to drain of all color. The untouchable, wealthy demeanor melted away entirely, replaced by a look of profound horror. He was staring directly at Kinsley's real credit history. He saw the massive, crushing debts, the red collection notices, the undeniable mathematical proof that the wealthy, carefree heiress he thought he was marrying was actually drowning in a financial disaster of her own making. At the other end of the long table, Richard and Eleanor were reading the itemized ledger I had provided them. Eleanor's manicured hand moved slowly to her chest, her mouth falling slightly open in shock. Richard's face turned a deep, angry shade of crimson. He looked up from the paper, glaring directly across the table at Orson. $80,500? Richard said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that commanded the room. You have been living off your older daughter for 4 years? You do not even pay your own property taxes on the house you supposedly own? Kinsley panicked. She did not know exactly what was printed on the papers inside those envelopes, but she knew immediately that the script had flipped horribly against her. Holden, whatever she just gave you, it is a lie. She shrieked, her voice shrill, desperate, and clawing at the air. She is crazy, remember? I told you she is having a mental breakdown. She forged all of this garbage to ruin our night because she is jealous. I stepped forward, planting my hands firmly on the edge of the dining table. My voice was loud, incredibly clear, and carried the heavy weight of 4 years of suppressed, simmering rage. My family is not wealthy, I announced, making direct, unflinching eye contact with Holden's horrified parents. They do not own this duplex. I own it. My name is the only one on the deed. They have been living upstairs completely rent-free because they refuse to hold down jobs. Over the last 4 years, I am the only one who has financially supported them to the exact tune of $80,000. That expensive designer dress Kinsley is wearing right now? I paid for it. The luxury vacation they took to Florida last summer? I paid for it. I was their personal ATM, their invisible, unappreciated sponsor. Corinne jumped up from her chair, real tears spilling down her heavily powdered cheeks. Sutton, stop it right now. How dare you humiliate us in front of our esteemed guests with these vicious lies? But I was far from finished. I turned my attention directly to Holden, who was now gripping the forged bank documents so tightly his knuckles were turning stark white. And 3 days ago, I continued, my voice dropping to a cold, menacing tone that made Kinsley flinch, I finally cut off their funding. I deactivated their secondary credit cards. Do you want to know what my loving, supportive family did in response? My father, Orson, walked into my bank with a forged power of attorney document, claiming I was mentally incompetent. He attempted to commit federal wire fraud and steal $40,000 directly from my retirement account to fund your lavish Italian wedding. The sharp sound of shattering glass pierced the heavy air. Kinsley's hand had started shaking so violently that she dropped her expensive wine glass directly onto the hardwood floor. The dark red wine splattered everywhere, soaking into the wood and looking remarkably like blood. That is a damn lie, Orson bellowed, slamming both of his fists onto the table, rattling the silverware, trying to regain control of the room through sheer, aggressive volume. She is making it all up to ruin us. I looked calmly at Holden. The bank manager's name and direct office phone number are printed at the bottom of that fraud form. Call him right now. Put it on speakerphone for the whole table to hear. Let us see who is lying. Holden did not call the bank. He did not need to. The evidence in his hands was completely irrefutable. The official bank stamps were real. The signatures were clearly, clumsily forged. The grand illusion was entirely dead. He looked at Kinsley, his eyes filled with a mixture of intense disgust and profound, life-altering betrayal. "You lied to me," Holden whispered, his voice shaking with a terrifying, quiet anger. "You told me your family was loaded. You told me she was the unstable one trying to steal money from you. You let me go to her driveway and threaten her like a fool, while you guys were actively trying to rob her retirement fund." "Holden, baby, please," Kinsley sobbed, reaching across the table to grab his arm. "I can explain everything. We just needed a temporary loan for the venue deposit. We were going to pay it back." Holden violently yanked his arm away, as if her physical touch was toxic. "Do not ever touch me again." He stood up so fast his chair tipped backward and crashed loudly onto the floor. He took the red envelope, crumpled it into a tight ball, and threw it directly at Kinsley's face. "We are done. The wedding is completely off." Absolute chaos erupted in my dining room, and for the first time in my entire life, I stood perfectly still in the center of the hurricane, entirely unbothered by the destruction. Richard and Eleanor stood up in unison, their faces masks of aristocratic disgust. Eleanor looked at Corinne with an expression of pure, unfiltered revulsion. "You people are absolute grifters," she spat, grabbing her expensive designer coat from the back of her chair and wrapping it tightly around herself. "To think we were going to merge our good family name with yours. It is sickening. You should all be deeply ashamed." Richard pointed a rigid, warning finger directly at Orson's face. "If you or your daughter ever attempt to contact my son again, I will personally fund the most expensive lawyers in the city to make sure you rot in federal prison for this little bank stunt. Let us go, Holden. We are leaving this madhouse." Holden did not look back at Kinsley. He marched straight out the front door, followed closely by his wealthy, furious parents. The heavy front door slammed shut behind them, the loud sound echoing through the duplex like a final gunshot ending a long, bitter war. The dining room was suddenly left exclusively to the family. Uncle Yates was staring blankly at his plate of cold chicken, suddenly very sober, realizing with horrifying clarity that he had aggressively backed the wrong horse. Aunt Maeve was leaning casually against the wall, sipping her wine, watching the total destruction of her sister's lives with quiet, undeniable approval. And then there was my immediate family. Kinsley was collapsed on the floor amid the shattered glass and spilled wine, wailing hysterically, her hands covering her face. Her perfect facade was completely ruined, her wealthy fiancé was gone forever, and her fake, glamorous life had burned to the ground in less than 10 minutes. Orson, realizing he had permanently lost his audience, his affluent safety net, and his pride, turned his rage entirely toward me. He took a massive, aggressive step forward, his face twisted in violent, uncontrollable fury. "You vindictive, evil little brat," he roared, raising a hand high in the air as if he was going to strike me across the face. "You destroyed your sister's life." I did not flinch. I did not step back. I calmly reached into the pocket of my slacks, pulled out my smartphone, and held it up right between us, my thumb hovering deliberately over the glowing screen. "Take one more step toward me," I said, my voice eerily calm and so quiet it forced him to stop yelling just to hear me. "Just one more step, Orson." My thumb is currently hovering over the dial button for the local police precinct. I have a certified copy of the forged bank documents. I have the security camera footage of you aggressively threatening me in my hallway 2 nights ago. Take a step, and I will press call. I will let them haul you out of here in handcuffs for attempted wire fraud. I will ruin whatever is left of your miserable, pathetic life. Orson froze mid-step. He looked at the glowing phone screen, then up at my eyes. He saw the cold, dead certainty staring back at him. The fake, aggressive alpha male bravado vanished instantly, replaced by the cowardly, trembling reality of an old man who knew he was finally caught. He slowly lowered his shaking hand and took a slow, defeated step backward. Corinne threw herself at my feet. She literally dropped to her knees on the hardwood floor, sobbing uncontrollably, her hands grasping at the hem of my pants. "Sutton, please. We are so incredibly sorry. We were just desperate. Kinsley needed the money for the wedding, and we did not know how to tell her no. Please do not call the police. We are your family. We love you. Have mercy on us. I looked down at the weeping woman who had spent my entire life telling me I was never quite good enough, never quite pretty enough, never quite as special as my sister. You had the envelope on the table, I told her, pointing a steady finger toward the untouched red package sitting by her plate. Open it. Corinne reached up with trembling hands, tore open the thick envelope, and pulled out the legal document inside. Her eyes scanned the legal jargon, her tears blurring the ink. That is a formal eviction notice, I stated, removing every last ounce of emotion from my voice. You do not have 90 days anymore. Because of your blatant attempt to commit a federal financial crime against me, my lawyer found a legal loophole regarding tenant hostility. You are officially classified as a severe threat to my financial and physical safety. You have exactly 7 days to remove yourselves and all your belongings from my property. 7 days? Kinsley gasped from the floor, wiping black, mascara-stained tears from her face, looking up at me in sheer terror. We have no money. We have absolutely nowhere to go. You cannot do this. I looked down at her, feeling a strange, profound sense of ultimate closure. Then I highly recommend you start packing your bags tonight. Because on day 8, the county sheriff will be here to physically throw your beds and your designer clothes onto the front lawn. I turned around, walked to the front door, and opened it wide, gesturing to the cold night air outside. Get out of my apartment, I commanded. They did not argue. They were completely broken. Orson grabbed Corinne's arm, pulling her off the floor, and they practically dragged a hysterical, sobbing Kinsley out of my unit and toward the stairs leading up to their apartment. Aunt Maeve walked over to me, stepping carefully over the spilled wine and broken glass. She looked at me, a proud, fierce smile spreading across her face. You did good, kid. You cleaned house. The next 7 days were an absolute masterclass in silent, brutal reality. I did not speak a single word to anyone upstairs. I did not answer their frantic text messages or their desperate knocks on my door. I went to work, expertly managed my logistics team, and came home to a quiet apartment. The heavy, thudding footsteps above me were no longer arrogant and aggressive. They were chaotic, rushed, and filled with blind panic. The severe consequences of their actions hit them like a runaway freight train. On day 4, a large, incredibly intimidating tow truck pulled into my driveway. Kinsley's expensive, leased luxury sports car, the one she absolutely could not afford without the backing of my secondary credit card, was unceremoniously hooked up and towed away for 3 months of missed payments. I watched silently from my kitchen window as she ran out onto the driveway in her pajamas, screaming at the repo man, but he ignored her entirely, doing his job with mechanical efficiency. There were no glamorous Instagram stories posted that day. The illusion was crumbling in real time. On day 7, exactly as the legal eviction notice dictated, a cheap, heavily dented moving truck pulled up to the curb. It was not a professional moving crew. They could not afford one. It was just Orson, looking exhausted, defeated, and easily 10 years older, carrying heavy cardboard boxes out the front door one by one. Corinne followed him, her head hung low in deep shame, carrying black trash bags filled with Kinsley's fake designer clothes and expensive shoes. None of their friends showed up to help them move. Holden was long gone. Uncle Yates was conveniently out of town on a sudden business trip. The extensive enabling network they had relied on for years had completely vanished into thin air the exact moment the money dried up. They were entirely on their own. I sat on my front porch in a comfortable wicker chair, wearing a warm sweater, sipping a hot cup of green tea, casually reading a novel. I did not lift a single finger to assist them. I simply sat there and watched them carry the heavy weight of their own terrible choices back and forth, box by box, out of my life. Around noon, Aunt Maeve drove up in her SUV. She walked up the porch steps carrying a small, white bakery box tied with string. She sat down in the empty wicker chair next to me, opened the box, and revealed 2 large slices of decadent, dark chocolate cake. "Happy Independence Day," Maeve said with a warm, genuine grin, handing me a silver fork. We sat together in comfortable silence, eating cake, while my family hauled their entire lives away. By late afternoon, the upstairs apartment was finally empty. Kinsley walked down the front steps one last time, holding a small, overstuffed duffel bag. She stopped at the bottom of the wooden porch stairs, looking up at me. The arrogant, entitled smirk was entirely gone. Her eyes were red and swollen from days of crying, her face pale and exhausted. "You won, Sutton," Kinsley said, her voice dripping with a bitter, defeated resentment that she just could not let go of. "You backed us into a corner and ruined everything I ever wanted. I hope you are happy sitting all alone in this big house with no family." I put my teacup down on the small table next to me. "I did not back you into a corner, Kinsley. I just stopped shielding you from the real world. I opened the door and let reality in. What you did with it was your own choice." She stared at me for a long moment, realizing with crushing finality that she had absolutely no power left to manipulate me. Her tears did not work. Her anger did not work. She turned around, walked to the cheap moving truck, and climbed into the passenger seat. Orson started the struggling engine. It sputtered loudly before roaring to life in a cloud of exhaust. They pulled away from the curb, driving down the street until they disappeared around the corner. When the truck was finally gone out of sight, a profound, heavy silence settled over the property. I stood up, walked into the house, and slowly climbed the internal staircase to the upper unit. The apartment was completely bare. Dust motes danced in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the large, uncovered windows. There were dark scuff marks on the walls and deep indentations on the carpet where their heavy, expensive furniture used to sit. It was empty, but it did not feel lonely. It felt incredibly clean. It felt like a massive, suffocating weight had been lifted off the physical foundation of the house and off my own shoulders. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the quiet, still air. For the first time in 32 years, I was entirely free. 6 months passed more quickly than I could have ever imagined. Half a year can change the entire trajectory of a human life when you finally remove the dead weight holding you down in the dirt. The duplex was quiet, but it was a warm, incredibly comforting quiet. I had immediately hired a professional deep cleaning crew to scrub the upstairs unit from top to bottom, erasing the last lingering physical traces of my family's toxic presence. Within 3 weeks of them leaving, I had rented the space out to a young, hard-working couple. They were quiet, respectful, paid their rent on the first of every month without fail, and occasionally brought me fresh vegetables from the local community garden they volunteered at. My financial situation transformed rapidly and dramatically. Without the massive, constant drain of supporting 3 dependent adults who refused to work, my bank accounts began to swell. The money I used to spend on Kinsley's fake designer bags, Corinne's wellness retreats, and Orson's golf club memberships was now being funneled directly into high-yield savings and aggressive retirement investments. My career in logistics flourished. Unburdened by the constant, exhausting emotional drama waiting for me at home, my focus sharpened immensely. I spearheaded a major supply chain initiative that saved the company millions, and I earned a major promotion to Regional Director of Operations, securing a massive salary increase and a beautiful corner office. I finally booked the 2-week luxury vacation to Europe that I had been postponing for 4 years. I walked the ancient cobblestone streets of Rome, drank incredible wine at small cafes in Paris, and realized how massive, vibrant, and beautiful the world was when you were not trapped in a dark cycle of family abuse. As for my family, news filtered back to me occasionally through Aunt Maeve, who still kept loose tabs on them out of morbid curiosity. The harsh reality of having to survive entirely on their own hit them hard. Orson and Corinne were forced to move into a tiny, cramped 1-bedroom apartment in a run-down, noisy part of the city. Orson, complaining of endless back pain, actually had to get a part-time job working the cash register at a local hardware store just to help cover their basic rent and groceries. Kinsley's fall from grace was the steepest and the most poetic. Without her affluent fiancé to fund her lifestyle, and without my credit cards to buy her props, her fake influencer lifestyle evaporated instantly. She was currently working grueling night shifts as a cashier at a massive retail chain store. She had deleted all of her social media accounts, unable to face the public humiliation of her canceled high society wedding and her exposed financial ruin. They never apologized to me. Toxic people rarely do. They simply shifted the blame, telling anyone who would listen that I was an evil, greedy, heartless sister who had abandoned them in their time of greatest need. But the people who actually mattered, like Maeve and the bank manager and Holden's wealthy family, knew the undeniable, documented truth. Yesterday, something completely unexpected happened. I was sitting on my porch, enjoying the crisp autumn breeze and reading a book, when my phone vibrated with a new voicemail notification. The caller ID was blocked, but when I listened to the message, I recognized the voice immediately. It was Corinne. She sounded incredibly older, exhausted, and hopelessly desperate. "Sutton, sweetie, it is Mom," her voice crackled through the speaker. "Please do not hang up. We are in a really bad spot right now. Our electricity is going to be shut off tomorrow morning because Orson's check bounced, and Kinsley's old car needs a new alternator so she can get to her night job. We just need $500 to survive the week. I know things ended badly between us, but we are your blood. Please, Sutton. Just this once. I love you." I listened to the message all the way through, my face completely expressionless. I did not feel a sudden surge of anger. I did not feel a wave of sadness or guilt. I just felt a deep, enduring, peaceful indifference. I pressed the delete button, erasing the desperate message from my phone forever. I did not call her back. I did not send the $500. I stood up, went inside my beautiful home, and made myself a hot cup of tea. Family is supposed to be your safe harbor, not the raging storm that constantly threatens to sink your ship. Cutting off your own flesh and blood is the hardest thing you will ever do, but sometimes absolute ruthlessness is the highest form of self-love and self-preservation. But I want to know what you guys think about how this ended. After everything they did to me, after the forged bank documents and the malicious lies, my mother was still crying and begging for help to keep their lights on. Was I too cruel by hitting the delete button and ignoring her plea? Should I have sent them the $500 just to keep them from freezing in the dark, or was I completely right to keep the door firmly shut forever? Let me know your honest opinions in the comments below. I read every single one. Thank you so much for watching this story. If you have ever had to set a massive boundary with a toxic family member, you know exactly how hard it is to break the cycle. If you enjoyed this video and found the ending satisfying, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on the daily drama. Stay strong out there and remember, you're not a bank. See you in the next video.